Hey everyone, and welcome to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about 1899 episode 6. It's called The Pyramid. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. So this one starts off with Tove, and largely it's her family's backstory. Obviously it's not just her. I actually do think it's kind of interesting that we effectively started with Crester as the main character from this family. But with his, apparent death for now, we've kind of switched to Tove being the one that we're actually following, and that she's the one who's kind of the sympathetic one of the group. But, obviously there's some other little mystery details to go along with her stuff. There's more pausing in the flashbacks until someone hits play. The way she enters her flashbacks are kind of repeatedly interesting. And the biggest thing being that when her final flashback is done, and obviously that ends with her shooting her attacker, she has blood on her face still when she comes back into the regular world, if you want to call it that. Once again, kind of implying that these aren't just dreams or hallucinations; they are physically going into another part of the simulation or something, and they're still, they're really going there. At least to the same extent that they're on the ship. Obviously, if this is all a simulation and it's all in their head in some capacity, then none of it's real. But in fact, Daniel even says none of this is real at one point in this episode. So all that stuff is there. There was, I don't think I mentioned it, but there was an allusion to her having killed someone in the last episode or two. And here we kind of get the context for that and why she killed someone, and it ties into Crester's story. We get a little bit of their parents as well. Obviously they're in the flashback, but we get them, they both have their own scenes with other characters this episode, which the fundamental setup of the episode is that the captain gives out some jobs to everyone, because if they don't get the ship going again, they're all going to die out here. So a lot of the guys go down to the engine room, some of the women go searching for any other survivors, because they rightly suspect that there could be more on board. It'd be weird to assume that everyone who stepped onto the deck at the end of last episode are the only people left. It turns out to be the case, seemingly, by the end of the episode, but it makes sense that they would think there's maybe some stragglers elsewhere in the ship. And yeah, so we get these flashbacks with Tove, and basically the gist of the story is that Crester was working for a farmer, and seemingly had a relationship with the farmer's son. And this farmer comes for revenge. I'll refer to him now as the bearded man, just because that's kind of... He was teased throughout the episode, and we kept seeing this bearded guy. But he shoots Crester in the face, which actually they've been teasing kind of like this scar on his face. Every time Angel talked to him, we got this mentioning of the scar. But Tove comes into the scene, and this guy is angry that that Crester has taken his son's innocence. Obviously, there's obviously the fact that it's a gay relationship is a big part of the problem for him. But he wants revenge, and shooting Crester isn't enough. He's going to take something from this family, and he hits Tove, and she sort of wakes up, and she's being raped by this guy. Which obviously the very first question I think I had, and anyone else watching it has, and perhaps the answer is probably quite obvious. Like, is this the father of her baby? And this is obviously the catalyst for why this family wanted to leave the country and move somewhere else. Is all of this. So obviously it's a very dark backstory. It's one of the more nasty ones to have to watch. You kind of sort of get what it's building up to at a certain point, and you kind of feel it in the pit of your stomach. Tove, who's been a very sympathetic and empathetic character throughout, at the start of this episode is even demanding to know where the boy is, because even she's starting to feel like he's to blame. Not so much that it's like a religious thing. In fact, her mother even mistakenly thinks she's hearing God's voice like her when she says she saw something, and she's seeing her siblings running around in the same way that the captain's seeing his dead daughter, and her mother's like, see, now you get it, now you hear the voice of God too, kind of thing. And the flip side to that is her father reveals that not only did he not want to be a priest, and that he was a farmer, and he was effectively just doing all this to make his wife happy, he doesn't even believe in God. and that's kind of an interesting little bit. So there's almost another divide here between the faithful and the faithless, kind of emerging as well. We talk about all these divides and things. So yeah, no, it's a pretty grim backstory. It's a very uncomfortable one. Obviously, there's the teases of like the blood still been on her face when she comes back. So it's a fairly strong backstory that kind of sticks with you. Throughout this plot, there's two other good character moments for others in the I said one's a good character moment, the other one's just a sort of mystery element, which is Virginia touching this black substance, which we see in other scenes Daniel warn people not to touch because he clearly knows more about it, and her entire hand gets infected with it, and her hand's now like black. Basically, I would describe this stuff that's starting to grow all over the ship, and also in the memories and the in the shafts and stuff. I would kind of describe this as like the Fortress of Solitude, Superman's Fortress of Solitude, the way the crystals grow. It kind of looks like that, but black. Is how I'd describe it if you've seen any of that. But so you've got that going on, and you've also got the scene that I really liked actually was Clemens, who's with Tove, and they can't really understand each other. I don't think any to a great extent. They're kind of, even just to ask like how long until her baby's due, she's kind of having to sign language a little bit to ask the question. But she has this moment where she says, the story is that men designed skirts and heels so that women couldn't run away, and she proceeds to take off her skirt and like grabs a pair of trousers that are in the room they're in and sort of changes. And to me, this was kind of like just a very clear of her breaking down this divide, of crossing over and saying, I don't have to be this, I can do this. And as simple as it is of just putting on a pair of trousers, it was very symbolic in the moment. And she's a character who is supposed to fit into this role and has felt very trapped by that. And it seemed to be fairly sympathetic in her role, even though Lucian, seems to hold her in this regard of like taunting him to some extent. But I thought it was a good little character moment. One of my favorites of the episode, which is kind of my favorite stuff in this episode, are a few of the little character moments. I didn't like this episode quite as much as the last one, and I think the reason for it's not that the quality is in any way dipped, it's just that while there's a lot of like weird reveals in this of things that add to the overall mystery, I don't think any of them actually change anything as to like what I think is going on, or as to what like everything just feels like it kind of confirms a bit more what we were already thinking. Rather than having my mind blown at any point with one of the teases of like, oh, this is implying this, it kind of felt like everything just implied what I already thought. So none of the like, oh, this weird thing's revealed, this metal ship-like wall behind the wall, none of that was really altering my kind of like theories or anything like that. And I think because of that, the mystery stuff, while entertaining to watch, it didn't have the same kind of like spice to it that maybe some of the stuff last episode did. So it's these little character beats like Clemens, like, swapping her dress out for a pair of trousers, that stuck out to me more. It stuck out to me a little bit because it felt like, okay, this is adding more to the themes of the show than the reveals in this episode are adding to the mystery. Not to say that there's not some nuggets to talk about, not to say that there's nothing of value, but it certainly wasn't up to the same kind of standard as last episode, and that's okay. But it's it's just, if I'm comparing the two of them, I would definitely say that about this one. So so to move on to, I'll move on to, just because it's not as much of it, I'll say the guys who go to the engine room, Ying Li goes with them. It's actually kind of sweet when the captain says all the women are going to go with Virginia, who's in charge of them. Ying Li sort of grabs Oleg's hand and later on says, what, you think I'm staying with them? And she goes up into like the coal area where he's going to unjam the thing, which we saw back in like episode 1 was something that he would have to do from time to time. So that was all very sweet, and then of course they have the actual, the kiss, right? They have this intimate moment where the boundaries break down a little bit. Again, even her helping, insisting that she help pull the lever, felt a little bit like breaking down of barriers and breaking, like basically erasing the divide as much as you can in the moment. So despite the fact that they can really not understand each other, I thought it was interesting actually that the few words they are able to say to each other that they both understand are English. I thought that was kind of interesting because because she asks like she sees his like postcard with the Empire, not the Empire State Building, sorry, the Statue of Liberty on it, and asks if a girl gave it to him, and obviously he doesn't understand what she said, but then she's able to just say the word girl, and he gets that, he understands the English word girl, so he's like no, not a girl, brother, and sort of, but it's kind of a sweet enough scene. It's this idea that she sees like something in Oleg that she doesn't see in other men, which is this sort of he is more this sympathetic character who seems to be kind, who seems to want to help people, and we've seen that through his actions, not just with her, but we've seen him wanting to warn the captain when the mutiny was going on, and just other little things like that. He didn't seem to be as concerned with some of the pettiness or whatever the other characters were going on with. He's a character who, while he's very much in one of the classes that we've sort of set up on the show, he doesn't seem like he's burdened with it or lets it dictate how he acts, and that makes him kind of likable in a lot of ways and commendable. And arguably that goes for some other characters. Obviously, Lucian and Jerome have a conversation where Lucian tells him about his tumor, and Jerome looks like he's conflicted about how to feel about it. He looks like he may actually feel sympathy for him, which again shows that he's a better person than Lucian is. So there wasn't too much in this side of the plot. This was kind of the C plot, as it were. Obviously, the other big stuff was with the captain and Mara, and they're looking for the boy. They go into the shaft in her room again, and they go into the asylum. And he's like, this is where you grew up, kind of thing. And she's like, yeah, but it's a little bit different. There's some details wrong. The door to my father's office isn't there. The big things being, though, that they find, like, they sort of pull apart some of the boards in the windows and find what looks like the metal of a ship. It looks like the rivets in the metal of a ship. Although I would actually maybe go a little bit further. So obviously you could say, wait, are all these like memory areas actually just rooms in the ship? Are they just like, because obviously later on the other part of this is we see that even the outside has like a barrier. It's kind of like in a video game where you have the invisible wall. Mara throws the gun and it hits it cracks like the screen, if you want to call it that, where she pulls like a square away and we get the same metal, implying that it looks like we're outside, it looks like we're out and there's like a horizon, but it's really just a projection or whatever, and the space isn't actually quite that big. However, though, like even just where they're standing to walk down to the asylum and then walking around that whole building, it is feasibly just impossible that this is just inside the ship, something the size of a ship. So my gut instinct here is that the ship and everything in these shafts and all that are all inside the pyramid. That would be the obvious assumption, I think, at this point. And that, the material that's sort of like growing kind of looks like the material that the pyramid's made out of. The metal of the ship isn't like that far from it, I guess. So like these would be where my mind would go with these ideas. But yeah, and there's another interesting little tidbit here, and I think I might have like once in passing talked about how if someone's created this place and is running it, they're kind of like the god. But there's a direct parallel drawn here with the captain, where he says when Mara tells him about ask the creator, you have to ask the creator. He's like, you mean as in God? And obviously we are not thinking literal God, but it does make me think about all these other scenes, especially in this episode, because the episodes have done a good job of having these thematic ties throughout an episode. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we have that question come up. Does he mean God? When he says the creator, does the kid mean God? In the same episode that we have Tove's father saying he doesn't believe in God, and we have the mother saying everything's part of God's plan. He writes our stories, we have to believe that it's the right thing and that he's doing all this. And that's what she maintains throughout the episode. So we have like these stark differences in beliefs in God and not believing in God. And I think it is interesting to see maybe if these characters learn that this world that they're in isn't real and it's actually just being controlled by a person. Would Tove's mother see him as her god? Would she feel betrayed, and that I don't know, like it did certainly make me think about where they might go with this idea of the creator of your world. Is that a god? Even in this case, when it's not really. Then again, though, where did this pyramid come from? Is he just harnessing this power that's around in this magic pyramid, or and that leads probably quite nicely into. I'll come back to these characters because we have to talk about the Daniel stuff that comes up with Mara, but Sebastian like goes through the door that the kid came through with the light around it, and then next time we see him, he's with Henry, Mara's father, and they're outside next to this pyramid. And it again, I said this last episode, but it feels like an alien planet, or it feels like Earth is seeing some bad days. And when he says to Sebastian, "We have to get that pyramid back from the boy. You broke protocol. How long?" And he says like, only about 48 hours until the transfer is complete. Is that transfer to the new ship so we can start the cycle again? That would be my guess, but I mean, we're open for other things. But when he says that we need to get that pyramid back, the fate of all this depends on it. Like, I was wondering, like is whatever he's trying to, as much as Mara said earlier on that he became fascinated with the human mind and the brain because his wife, Mara's mother, became sick mentally, and he wanted to like find a way to answer the questions that he couldn't before. Like, that's really interesting. But it did make me wonder if like the stakes are bigger than that, and that he's like, I don't know if he's trying to save the world or something by solving the mystery of the human brain or what. But you can't deny that when he's standing in that landscape next to this pyramid with Sebastian, and there's lightning going off and everything looks grey and like sort of lifeless, it's like desolate. It feels like the apocalypse. If either we're on an alien planet or it feels like Earth is going to shit. Or maybe we're on like a super secret island somewhere that's, like I said last episode, and this is just what it's like there. I don't know, but it feels biblically like bad, right? And maybe saying biblical is not a bad thing since the subject of God's coming up so goddamn much in this episode, and indeed the show as a whole. So yeah, so that was kind of my thoughts on that stuff. But the idea that some characters are going to look up to him as the god of their world, whereas Mara's looking up and just shouting father at one point, and that's when she sort of starts to see the boundaries. Which actually, one of the things that the father said to Sebastian that I thought was particularly interesting was at the end of the scene, he's talking about people in general, or maybe the people specifically in the simulation on the ship. But he says people are imprisoned by their own restrictions. All they have to do is shift their perspective to see the full scope of things. And that's kind of what's happening to Mara, is that she's starting to get a new perspective on everything by seeing these boundaries in her simulation. But obviously, I've skipped over Daniel showing up and fighting with the captain, and Daniel teleporting the captain back to his like memory, where his house is. Obviously, that leads to an ending. Where he realizes he's not even on the same ship anymore. He's actually on the Prometheus all on his own, and the Prometheus is surrounded by identical ships, presumably all the previous cycles of this. And this is what I was talking about earlier, how this is a neat enough like moment at the end, but it doesn't, we already thought there's lots of previous cycles. It's probably a different ship every time, they're the same ship with a different name. So the ending, well, it was a nice little moment. It didn't feel like a big gut punch because it just kind of confirmed what we already felt. But that's kind of what I mean by the mystery stuff not being as juicy this time, even though there's a lot of stuff that's kind of hinting at things and prodding at it bigger. Which is why perhaps the bigger thing is probably Daniel straight up saying that he and Mara are married, and they've been married for 12 years. So I thought he was the brother, but I did say, if you go back to like episode 3 or whatever it was, whenever he was looking at her photo, I did say it felt maybe a little romantic. Like, there's a possibility that he's actually a romantic interest rather than the brother. But I still leaned more towards the brother because the brother had been mentioned a few times. But no, he's saying they're married, and he begs her to remember. And when she locks him in the room, the last thing he says is, "I love you, please wake up." And that's, it's interesting because wake up's been kind of the thing that start... if this season doesn't end with Evanescence, wake me up. What was the song called? Bring Me to Life. That's what the song's called. But it's just Wake Me Up. That's the line in the chorus. If it doesn't end with that, I'll be surprised. Although all the music's been very 70s and 80s, and obviously we have the Jimi Hendrix song at the end of this one. And I do actually quite like that song, so I wasn't mad to hear it. But, obviously she's not remembering, which is why she still locks him in. Although it does feel like she's getting a tinge of emotion from it. She's starting to feel things, and maybe there's some like actual under the surface feelings that are kind of bubbling because this has been provoked on her. But it does feel like this black substance growing everywhere is like, oh, this is the countdown to the end of this cycle. And Daniel knows that, and he doesn't want to leave her again. He doesn't want to start this all over again. And this is the furthest I've gone. I would suspect we are going to start a new cycle. And possibly, I mean, it could be the cliffhanger at the end of the season that we're on a new cycle. Maybe with one difference where Maura remembers everything or something like that. But I almost hope it happens a little quicker, just so we can actually get a little bit of the next cycle before the end of the season. I don't know if we're going to, though. But all very interesting. Another weird tidbit is that all the books on the bridge all have the same sentence written in them, because when the power comes back on, when the guys in the engine room get the power back on and the ship starts to get going a little bit, Tove's father and Ramiro are like, wait a minute, how do we steer? Someone needs to steer the ship. We can't just go willy-nilly. And he starts looking through the books thinking, oh, maybe it'll give me some tips to direct the ship. And it all just says the same. So I wrote this down because I was never going to remember this, I don't think. All the books say over and over again, in the same way in The Shining, everything he typed was, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. It just says, may your coffee kick in before reality does. Which, interestingly, does kind of tie into that key phrase again, wake up, right? Like, people drink coffee to try and stay awake or to wake themselves up in the morning. And it's this idea that maybe if some of the characters can actually realize and remember who they are, and that none of this is real, before things reset, there's a chance that they'll keep their memories with it. Maybe that's why Daniel can remember things. Maybe that's why Daniel is sort of like sticking around jump to jump. It wouldn't surprise me though if one of the last couple episodes coming up do follow Daniel and kind of how he gets into a loop, if he's not already always here. Is he hijacking in somehow? How is he doing it exactly? And who is the boy? I feel like those are things that are probably the big things we're still going to get to this season, is kind of giving us a lot more context for those two characters and who they are and what they're up to. It's beyond just they're trying to stop this and break the loop. But yeah, all that stuff's exciting. All it really is. And it's a solid episode. Like I say, the only downside to this one is that none of the reveals really change the game again. And that would be okay, I suppose, if it was if it hit me emotionally. But I don't know if anything did either. This is kind of a solid episode that stokes the mysteries without adding anything huge to them, and gives some good character moments for several of the characters, but without there being any a big oomph. And I think and it really comes down to the ending a little bit, where the ending is perfectly fine. They say a decent reveal, but it's the kind of reveal where I'm not wowed by this, because it's not comparing to some of the other ones that the show's already had, because it just kind of confirms what we already. I mean, I think everyone already gets that there was multiple cycles, therefore multiple ships. So the visual of seeing all the ships isn't that, it's a cool shot, but it's not that interesting or exciting because we've already kind of assumed this. But anyway, that's episode 6 of 1899. That's the name of the show. There's so many things to remember with this episode, and apologies for doing one every other day as opposed to one per day, but I don't have time to watch it twice in the same day, and I feel like I need to watch the episodes twice because there's so many things in them. So I've been watching them the day that I don't put a review out, and then the day I do put the review out, today, I watch it again and take down notes on my second viewing, so that I'm not missing details that I think are important. And even then, I've probably still missed some things. So there's a storm on the horizon at the end of the episode, and we'll see. It really feels that things are winding up to a climax, which is cool. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode 1899 in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at Wibble89, although if that doesn't exist much longer, at Mailed Fuzz on Hive, if you would prefer, since that's the thing now, Hive Social. But you can, of course, support all the content by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications. You can hit the super thanks button for a one-time donation, or you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support on a monthly basis to keep all the content coming from MailFuzz TV, MailFuzz Movies, and anything else that we do. So thank you once again. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?